Hello old bean, today I am going to talk about classic British literature. So stay tuned for some cake and gay stuff and lashings of ginger beer. Pip pip old bean. And my god, that was terrible. Welcome to Letterbomb. Hello there, now that I'm being me instead of that voice, which I'm probably going to call Lord Humphrey Snootington, because it's fantastic for that. I'm Josh, my channel is the Madhouse, I'll put every link down below, and today, as you've guessed, I'm talking about classic British books from the beautiful island known as the British Isles. I'm hoping that Aurora and Lucy will continue this and do their own videos about classic Australian and American literature. Now, I should point out a few teeny little things. This list is obviously not definitive because there will be numerous LGBT books, but these are those generally considered to be classics. I am apologising now for the fact that there is no trans representation in this and none of the plus representations that I'm aware of anyway. There aren't that many books out there and I'm always looking. If you can point me in the right direction, I'd be really pleased to hear from you. There's also something else. I don't quite like the term queer book or LGBT plus book, because it implies that they are only for members of the queer community, while every other book is for everyone, and that's not quite right, because an excellent book should be there to be read by absolutely anyone, regardless of their gender or sexuality or lack thereof. Some books have messages so profound and great, or stories so good, that it really shouldn't matter what sexuality they present or what sexuality and gender their reader is. The message is still valid and should be read by as many people as possible, and then they can decide what they like. But it is also a necessity, because people need to be able to find things that show them that they are actually real, that their problems are not imaginary or just in their head, that there is such a thing as homosexuality or whatever. These are not listed according to personal preference, just in the order that I thought of them. So, to begin with, there is The Microcosm by Maureen Duffy, which is quite an interesting read actually. I took it out from the library and I quite enjoyed it. It is set in the famous lesbian Gateways Club in London. And as you might guess, this Gateways Club serves as a microcosm for the queer and more specifically the lesbian community. It shows that there is nothing wrong with being queer and that there's no one way to be queer. There are butch lesbians and... what's that word? I really dislike saying it because, well, it feels like the word faggot for gay people, which I don't understand why that's an insult either. But, or power dykes, or whatever, or people of any sort of gender expression within the lesbian community. It really doesn't matter. The uniting feature is that they happen to be women who like women. And that's it. And it's good, and there should be more books that teach such positivity. However, I would add one slight note to this. It is a very, very advanced read. Maureen Duffy's prose is... what's that word? Very difficult. I would recommend maybe finding something a little bit easier if you're just trying to start out in queer literature. But if you are an excellent reader, then I'm sure you will love this. Next there is Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit by Jeanette Winterson. And this is actually a great book. It's not the happiest of stories, but it's fantastically written. It tells the tale of Jeanette. We're told that this isn't autobiographical, but there are hints of it because there are similarities to the author's own life. And it starts from childhood and follows her through adolescence into adulthood. She's from a very religious family and she's an outcast at school because of it. And then she starts to question the religious teaching she's been brought up with, and she starts to realise that she is a lesbian. She falls in love with and has a relationship, or maybe an affair might be a better word, with a friend, and she has to try and balance her sexuality and her religion. And while this story doesn't necessarily apply to me because I don't have a faith, the book has an excellent message of showing that you don't have to choose between your faith and who you love or want to sleep with. The two don't have to be at odds, although there will be people who will always disagree with that. This is a story that you don't tend to find that much in the UK, actually, because religion is, while still important in the lives of many people, not so big of a deal than it is in the US or in parts of Europe. Because, let's face it, we spawned Darwin, Dawkins, Penrose, Hawking, Hitchens, all of these famous atheists. We practically invented atheism as a concept. I did really enjoy this book, and I think you will too, but if you are sensitive about the idea of exorcisms or conversion therapy, that sort of thing, I suggest you don't read it. Because, what's that word? Graphic. Up next there is Maurice by E.M. Forster. Forster is one of the best English novelists of the 20th century, even without this book, but with it he really edged over it. You may know his book A Room with a View, which is fantastic, and probably quite heterosexual, although I did have one interpretation of one scene that my English teacher disagreed with. It was written in 1913 while Forster was still a young man, but not published until his death 60 years later in 1971. And it's a story of, well, love. And it's one of the first gay novels to actually have a happy ending, where the main protagonist doesn't die or contract some horrible disease or get put in prison. It's just a nice story. Kind of sweet. It grows on you over time. At the start, Maurice is a bit of an arse, but you'll learn to love him. There is A Single Man by Christopher Isherwood. Some people might not consider this a classic from the UK because it was written while he was living in California, but he was himself an Englishman, so go with it. The story is a single day in the life of George, a single man. And he's only single because the law would not accept his partnership to the man he loved, so he couldn't be a widower. It's heartbreaking and wonderfully sad and happy at the same time, and there was also an excellent film with Colin Firth in it, where Colin Firth is really rather handsome and he performs exceptionally well, as he always does. It's semi-autobiographical because both George and Isherwood were lecturers or professors, whatever, at a university in California when they lost their partner. Now, it's not entirely true because, well, Isherwood's partner didn't die, he just went overseas for a while, but it was more of an extended separation that felt like a bereavement. If you want to be moved and to have a look at what it meant to be gay in the 1950s in America and particularly California from the eyes of a British perspective, give this a go. There is The Sins of the City of the Plain by an author who is completely unknown, although some people reckon it might possibly have been Oscar Wilde. It's a collection of essays published by an author writing under the pseudonym of Jack Saul, confessing his various exploits, sexual and otherwise. It's practically pornographic at times, but it's quite fascinating to take a look at, well, gay life in the 19th century, way before any form of gay rights movement. Quite fascinating. The next book is one that I'm currently reading at the moment, or listening to on Audible rather, The Swimming Pool Library by Alan Hollinghurst. Now, this is a brilliantly written book, so poetic in its language, and the prose is so beautifully formed. But what it described is not so beautiful. Or at least one might not call it that, some people would. It features something that only really tends to crop up in British novels, so it's something that's quite unique to it. Class. We still have quite an ingrained class system in the UK, and while I don't like it, we have to live with it. And this book explores it. It takes a look at the homosexual lifestyle, and I hate saying the word homosexual like that, but that's the term that it's using in the book. Before the AIDS scare of the 70s or 80s, I'm not that good at time. I think it might have been 80s. The main character's name is Will. He's a rather promiscuous man who has sex with anything with a pulse and a cock. And his... I'm not sure you call it an adventure because it's mostly about him having sex. He's having a relationship with... He's having a relationship that would have been considered scandalous because other than the fact that it was homosexual, it was also with a black man. which is just really annoying to read back at, but from the time it was written, it's quite scandalous. So it's fascinating to take a look at the world from a perspective so removed from my own, yet so similar in some ways. Just the fact that I'm gay. And the last book I'm going to mention is the Picture or Portrait of Dorian Gray. I could never remember which one it is. I think it's probably Picture. It's of course written by Oscar Wilde, who was a truly fantastic writer. Dorian is an extremely hedonistic individual and he's bisexual. He just goes after men and women for pleasure, that's all he wants. But there is at least one definitely gay character and possibly the other one's bisexual. And there are these two men vying for Dorian's affections. It's exceptionally well written, like anything Oscar Wilde wrote. He had a way with words that's practically unrivaled. There are very few people who can write anywhere near as well as Wilde did, and he knew it. It's a stunning story, stunningly written. I will admit it has been about 8 years since I last read this, so I'm forgetting most of the details, but that's most of what I can remember. Anyway, that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please click like, share and subscribe, and leave any comments recommending any other British LGBT books you can find. I know books about things other than the LG and B, but none of which are considered classics, so obviously we need to do some educating, because there are a few that will be classics one day, and I hope to make sure of that. Also, as I mentioned at the start of the video, Lucy and Aurora should hopefully be doing videos like this soon, and we're also planning a small series, let's call it, on good and bad representation. My personal favourite one I'm planning is on gay villains. Are they a good thing or a bad thing? So stay tuned if you want to hear about that. Have a gay day. Goodbye.